Lammas hills, that they were places where the community would process up to offer the first fruits of the harvest and to make offerings to possibly to make love as well between heaven and earth. So in a way, the body being offered or the spirit being offered is a similar idea. And in Scotland they have these little lammas cakes which are made in the same shape. So if you go over to the Tump in Lewis, you see that the particular angle of the hill is exactly the same as Silbury Hill, it's just smaller. But even though it's small, if you walk up and you stand on the top of it, you still have this sense of being high up, looking out across the landscape. And where would you walk from for there? Well, you could pick in all sorts of different places, but say, I'm choosing walks that are doable. Obviously, you might want to do a long walk, you might want to do a pilgrimage, you might want to spend 3 days walking to a particular spot. We have 2 meetings a year in Glastonbury, our Druid group, just before the summer solstice and the winter solstice, and we have a big event, we do ceremonies on the tour and so on. And there are some people who walk for a couple of days before to get there. So I know one chap who comes from Holland, and then he'll walk for sort of 3 days across the land to arrive in Glastonbury on the day. Fantastic idea. But these are short walks. But imagine if you walked from Glynde to the Tump. That's just a few miles, maybe 3 or 4 miles. You'd have to walk softly and gently because there's the gill giant who sleeps in a barrow just by Glynde, and you wouldn't want to wake him up. But although he's probably used to it because he's near Glyndebourne, the opera house, so he's probably always turning in his barrow and sort of listening, and tossing and turning. But anyway, you tiptoe past him. And you go have you ever done? Has anybody done that walk from Glynde to Lewis? Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. There's a point. You go up to Mount Cavan. You're on Mount Cavan. It's a wonderful high place. An Iron Age fort, although perhaps not. There was some archaeological research done in 2001, and the Times correspondent writing about it said, in all across there was dark yew woodland. There's a wonderful way in which plant pollen survives thousands of years, and it's hard to understand how that works, because you would think pollen would be such a fragile thing, and I kind of don't understand how it can survive thousands of years, but it does. Sufficiently for people to be able, for paleobotanists, archaeobotanists, to be able to determine what the plant was. So we know that yew forest covered this place for around sort of 3000 BC, something like that. Yew everywhere. And yew was sacred to the Druids, and so there's, perhaps there were sacred groves of yews up on Mount Cavan there. And the Times chap writes, in Roman times a broad, deep ritual shaft was dug, and this, together with the other evidence, leads the investigators to ask whether Mount Cavan was not a hill fort at all, not even a settlement, but rather an arena for the public display at a discreet distance of private ritual acts, an enclosure filled with holy pits and shafts, replacing the sacred yew groves. So if so, they believe, it was almost certainly Christianity that ended the old ways of Cavan. So when we take that walk from Glynde up over Mount Cavan, we're going to a very, very old spot. And you've got these tremendous views across the landscape. You've got this knowledge that there was this yew forest, that there were these ritual shafts with weapons, with animals that seem to have been ritually laid in these ritual pits and so on. Travelling down, and you know when you get to Bible Bottom, you go sort of down over the top. You could be anywhere, couldn't you? I mean, the sense that the A27 is there and the town is over there just disappears, and you feel as if you're in the middle of nowhere. And you carry on, and then you get up onto the golf course, and you see the tumuli there. And a little over to your right is the fat-bellied woman, which is the one you can see from Lewis, as you go down the cliff. You can see the sort of 2 tumuli of her breasts, and you can see the hump and her tummy and so on. And it's a fat-bellied woman on the right. You travel on down, and you come down that lovely chapel lane, and you come into Lewis. And again, if you're foolish, you'll stop off at one of the many cafes that people, the streets of Lewis. You keep going straight to the Tump. And you might get there when some people are celebrating Lammas, Lunacy, or you might find yourself on your own. But either way, it's a time to climb the sacred mound In doing that, you'll be doing something that people have done for thousands of years. And it's a time for giving thanks for the gift of life, for all that you've experienced in the year that's passed. It's the time also of the beginning of endings. Because there are two harvest festivals. One, beginning of August at Lunar, when it begins. And the second harvest is in September, around the 21st, 22nd, which is the autumn equinox, which is the end of the harvest period. So the harvest carries on August through September. And so you're starting the process of ending stuff. So again, just as Imok, the time in February, was the time of promise, of sowing seeds, of beginning things, coming around to the 1st of August, the beginning of the harvest, is the time of fulfillment, where the fruits start to be yielded and so on, and it's the time of starting to let go. It's even a time I've noticed in some people have a very slight sense of sadness that comes upon them, usually more towards, as you get more towards September, towards the time of the autumn equinox, time of the harvest, and sometimes if you talk to people, you discover it's not actually it's not related to their personal life at all. It's tuning in to the sadness of the time, because it's a time which isn't actually sad, it's a time of letting go, of releasing. And that can somehow be interpreted at an emotional level as sadness within us. And this is the time of reverencing the ancestors and those who've gone before us. So let's, for instance, go to the old church at Berwick. And let's go from one old church and old barrow to another old church and Tumulus. So we can take a walk along the Vanguard Way. The Vanguard Way is a 66-mile track that runs from Croydon through to Newhaven. And when you go to Berwick, you can join it there. And this is a short walk. This is about 3 miles, something like that. But Berwick Church is that wonderful church that when the bombs, what used to happen with the German bombers when they used to fly back after their missions, is we went out, or the British went out and painted Longman green. I don't know if you know that, but we slapped on some, because it was originally a chalk figure, but actually when you look at it, you're not looking at chalk, you're looking at concrete slabs that are painted white. Painted white by the Druids recently, as an act of, in conjunction with the Sussex Archaeological Society. We all went up and painted it, which was great fun. But these were painted, those concrete slabs were painted green during the war to fool the Germans, so they didn't know where they were. And they would be flying back, and obviously when you fly back you don't want to land with a bunch of bombs, and so you might have a few spare. So they used to chuck them out before, as they saw the English Channel coming, they chucked them out. Which is why you get things like, up on the downs when you go up behind the prison, there's that pond that's now been dedicated to somebody who died. There's a bench and the little thing. It's a really nice idea, and they've sort of done it as a dew pond. That was originally just a bomb crate. One of these bombs happened to drop by Berwick Church. It blew the stained glass out. Very wisely, they put clear glass back in. So you can sit, if you go in the spring, around the time the crocuses and the snow drops out, it's absolutely fantastic. And even if you're the most die-hard pagan who would never set foot in a Christian church, I challenge you to go into Berwick Church at around that time and to sit in this wonderful old building, to look out through the windows and to see all these flowers, and to see right next to the church the old tumulus. Because there's a way in which churches were built right next to or on top of ancient sacred sites. So above Berwick there's Lullington, which was originally almost certainly a Druid grove. It has the tiniest church in England built there. It's a tiny little chapel that's sort of plonked right in the middle of the grove. So some people get sort of quite angry and say, look how our old sacred sites have been usurped by this incoming religion. But I think there's another way to look at it, which is just to see, well, this is what's happened, and this is part of our heritage. And so our heritage is made up, on the one hand, of the pre-Christian past, the pagan past, and also of the Christian past. And we can be nourished and learn from both of them. and which is why I think the new kind of celebrations of festivals that I was talking about up on Firle Beacon, for example, are so exciting because they represent that kind of approach. And so you're sitting in Berwick Church, and there's wonderful paintings by Duncan Grant, Christ in the Downland, up on the walls. Absolutely fantastic. And you're looking at it, and you can see this link with the past, this old tumulus there, knowing that sort of pre-Christian ancestors are buried there. And then you set off along the old track to Alfriston. You get to Alfriston, same thing. Big old barrow, ancient church next to it. And that ancient church has a lovely old story attached to it about how they kept building a church there, but every morning the devil had thrown the stones up, so that all the stones that they'd laid had just been chucked away. Then they were looking and they saw 4 oxen standing, grazing, facing the 4 cardinal directions, just over by the barrow. And they thought, aha, this is a sign, we must build a church there. And they moved it, and they built it by the barrow there. And so you arrive at this other barrow, and whether you choose to light candles in the church, or sit on the barrow, or sit beside the barrow, and think of all the people that you have loved who have died, all the people who have passed on, send them your wishes, connect with them, and so on, to perform your own celebration of Samhain, a special time in your own way, is a matter of choice. But then you can make the journey back along the same way. And so, we could go on and we could pick. It's fun to do this. It's fun to look at the landscape